both work and education have to be about being in the moment, enjoying the process, or at least learning from it. And that will make us much happier.
Amy, thank you so much. It's great to have you here. You're one of the world's most known psychologists, social psychologists. And you talk about many things, but I would like to talk to you today about education.
Okay.
And especially how do we teach our children, our girls and boys, on how to, our gesture, our non-verbal communication, how can they help them during their whole life?
I think this is really important. I mean, for our sons and our daughters, but in particular for girls, because they are, much less likely to hold themselves in an open way as they get older. And we know that if you are carrying yourself in a powerless way, it makes you feel powerless. So it's undermining women by carrying themselves that way. But I think in general, our kids don't learn about how the body and the mind are connected. So they learn that you sit in class all day and it's all about what happens in your head. And then you have gym class and lunchtime and that's it. That's when you move around. And then you're taught that the reason you move around is because it's good for your physical health, but it's also good for your mental health, and it's good for your ability to concentrate and for your performance and all of these other things. So I think that first we need to connect the body and the mind for our kids. We need to start early. We need to explain to them that when we tell them to sit up straight, it's not to show respect to other people. It's out of self-respect. It's something they can do for themselves, that it will make them feel less frightened and less anxious. We need to tie sports and gym class to psychological well-being, not just physical well-being. I think we need to show our daughters images of women who unapologetically carry themselves with power and pride and poise, and it doesn't make them masculine to do that. But I think we continue to send our daughters this image that they should be princesses, with their elbows pinned to their sides and be dainty and small, and that if they're not that way, no one will like them. And I think that's a real mistake. So we need to show them examples of women and girls who are unapologetically powerful and strong, show them that doesn't make them boys.
Yeah, and in fact, I guess that there is something also in the family surrounding that we must be talking to them, to girls, exactly because of this, because probably it's not only about how we are, but how we behave and how we can change the way we see each other. Certainly,
and I think that a father once came up to me and said, "I will never again tell my daughter to sit like a lady." And I thought that was so important. I mean, if we start doing that when they're little, what do they learn from that? That means be quiet, be small. Don't get in the way of the boys, of the men. I think that in some cultures it's much worse than in other cultures. So I think in a lot of Western cultures it's less bad than it is in some other places. But we also need to be modeling that behavior. We need to ask them to share their ideas. We need to give them space to share their ideas. Encourage them to speak up on behalf of themselves, but also on behalf of others. One thing that I think is really good for girls, and I did not do sports, I did ballet, but I think that team sports really help girls, especially in the middle school age, because, age 11 to 13, if you're on a team and strength and openness are valued, then that becomes the norm. That becomes an accepted way to be. So I think that when our daughters hit that age, like middle school age, it is important to really pay attention to their body language. And if you see that they start to collapse and cover themselves up and make themselves small, help make them aware of their body language. Ask them what's going on. I mean, I do this with my son too. He's 14 and he might be on his phone. And all of a sudden I see him collapse. And I always say, what happened? Like, what just happened? And usually it's something on Snapchat. Like it's something like, oh, I posted a picture and nobody responded. And so I'll say, okay, put the phone down. Let's get away from the phone. And at first he's agitated and then he's happy that he got away from the phone. So I think pulling them away from that as well not only is it bad for your posture, but there's so much social anxiety that kids are experiencing when they're online. Getting them away from that, I mean, it's so critically important. I mean, just having the phone on the table during dinner changes the quality of conversation. So when people are talking and there's a phone on the table, even if it's face down, the conversation is more shallow, so people don't talk about deep things. And people are distracted. They're not able to really be present with each other. And I think we need to teach our kids that. We tell our kids to put their phones down, but then we're on our phones all the time. Like, we can't do that. We have to do it first before we can tell them to do it. But yeah, I think our daughters need to be seeing images of these women who are unapologetically powerful and proud and poised, and to learn that it doesn't make them masculine to be carrying themselves in these open ways.
Yeah, in fact, I think you talked before about an example of a woman who is, it's not masculine and she's very powerful, which is Michelle Obama, which is a very good example. There is something, I want to ask you something about something that it's sadly a very current issue, which is bullying, especially in schools. Is there something we can tell the kids about their self-esteem, something that they can do with a post to change things, to try to fight against this?
So one thing is that I think bullying is a problem for adults as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's become a bigger problem among adults with the sort of speed at which information travels on the internet, social media, etc. So I think it's, we think of it as a kid's problem, but it's also an adult problem. I think the important thing for kids to realize is that, bullying does not come from a place of power. It comes from a place of powerlessness. So kids who are bullying other kids are not doing it because they just feel so comfortable and happy and powerful that they feel like doing it. They're doing it because they feel powerless. They feel bad about themselves. And so they're trying to get a sense of power by stepping on somebody else. And I think understanding that power dynamic is really important. And then helping kids to become aware of the things that make them start to collapse. I mean, really, to become self-aware of body language is such a gift, and the earlier you do it, the better. If they start to collapse, tell them, open your shoulders, breathe slowly and deeply. Don't allow yourself to act like a frightened animal, because as soon as you do that with your body, your mind follows, and everything seems so much worse than it is. I know it's hard to tell kids it's not a big deal. You can't really tell them that. You need to understand what it is they're feeling, but also help them understand how they can, change their mindset and their body language so that it feels less stressful for them.
Yeah, and when we grow up, we become adults, and then we go into work. And we replicate the same models, same poses. And what can we do, especially as women, but what can we do in general to try to overcome? I'm sure not all of us can be an alpha male, but what can we change there?
I don't want really anyone to be an alpha male. I mean, I think that power is not zero-sum. Power is infinite. And anyone who feels like an alpha male, whether they're male or female, is not paying attention to relationships and not building sustainable relationships. People can feel powerful together. And first, we should be encouraging each other to feel powerful. So we should not feel threatened if someone is speaking up. We should be glad to see that, because that's where ideas and innovation and change come from, right? They don't come from people feeling quiet and sitting there and only speaking up when they think they're saying the right thing, right? It comes from, slightly awkward, uncomfortable situations. We should be moving more at work. We should not just be sitting over our desks, because this is what happens to us. And we're not present because we're focused on what's happening in the computer and not in front of us, not what's happening in this space. But it's also making us feel sort of powerless. Set up your workspace so that it forces you to spread out. So don't have your mouse right under you. Have it over here. Have pictures of things that you love, like your family or your friends or something, high on the wall so that you have to look up to see them. So set up your space in a way that's conducive to openness. Get off your phone, but also walk. So I'm a huge proponent of walking meetings. So rather than sitting across the table from each other or across a desk from each other, walk together. There's so much research showing that walking meetings lead to greater creativity, better negotiation outcomes, better business relationships. But I think this really resonates with people when they think of it this way. Think of a first date where you sit across a table from each other. You don't move, you're terrified, you're looking at each other, no one knows what to say, it gets worse and worse. Think about if we had first dates that were walking dates, right? You walk all over the city instead of sitting there across from each other, all, feeling like a trapped animal. It would be so much better. And I have to say, I speak from experience because my husband and I, our first date was in Paris and we just walked all over Paris.
So it worked.
It worked really well, but I hear from so many people who say that this works for them, to plan walking into that first date. Why not do the same thing at work when we're also socially, it's the same stuff operating psychologically. We're afraid of being judged and the stakes feel high. So we start really obsessing about what we think they think of us rather than really focusing on what they think. It's not about what they think of us, it's about what they think. And so when we're moving, we feel free, we feel powerful, we don't feel so fixated on that what they think of me, and we're able to be more open. So I'm a big fan for everyone of walking meetings.
Yeah, great. And what can we do when we have a stressful situation in the workplace, and to change it to a positive situation? How can we change that, if there is a way?
One thing is, and I know this seems a little counterintuitive, when we approach those situations, we have to do it with a sense of trust. So you actually have to convince yourself that most people are good and that everyone wants the situation to go well. Most people don't go into these situations feeling like, oh, I hope this goes really poorly because that will make my day great. It's, especially in a business setting, people want things to go well. They want to create value, not destroy value. So going in, having a sense of trust toward the other person, that is it's an incredibly powerful way to build trust. If you go in and you trust them, they're able to trust you. And once you have trust, you've got a medium through which ideas travel, right? Without trust, it's just a wall. So that's one thing. I know that's not about posture, but that is something that I think we all need to do better. Instead of going in thinking they're out to get us or they're just judging us, they might feel the same way. They might feel like you're just judging them. So go in and trust them. If you really feel stressed before you walk into one of these situations, that's when I suggest that people find a private space, like their own office or a bathroom stall or an elevator with nobody in it, and adopt these really open, powerful postures like the superhero pose or the victory pose, something that's pretty extreme. And that helps to sort of reset your brain. Your body is now telling you that you're strong, that you're safe, that you are not threatened. And so when you walk in with that attitude rather than an attitude of feeling threatened and feeling weak.
And they say that it takes 21 days to get a habit into our lives. Is there any daily tips, any daily exercises that you would recommend to change things?
I don't know about the 21 days in this case. One, you have to become self-aware about your body language. So especially pay attention to what makes you start to slouch and breathe in a shallow, fast way. What makes you feel comfortable and open. When you pay attention to that, you get to know what the cues are that threaten you or that make you feel safe. So pay attention to that. When you do start to feel yourself collapse, force your shoulders open. Take some deep breaths. All of those things will cue a relaxation response that calms you down. Pause when you're speaking. Speak more slowly. You're taking up temporal space, and that also makes you feel more powerful. So there are some things that you can do in those moments when you feel particularly stressed to pull yourself out of it. Don't allow yourself to spiral downward. But there are other ways that you can sort of build things into your life. Like I brush my teeth with my hand on my hip in the morning before I get out of bed instead of being in the fetal position, which is how I sleep. I sleep like this. I stretch out in bed and do sort of the starfish. before I put my feet on the ground, which means like pushing my giant husband aside. But he's like a sprawler. I'm convinced there's like this complementarity where you have like a fetal person and a sprawler. But so do that before you put your feet on the ground in the morning. Just build in these expansive movements. Take longer strides when you walk. Don't feel like you're in a tiny box. You're not in a box. You're just in the world. Take up some space.
Amy, one last question. I have to ask you this. I've heard you saying that you can feel much better with your pose, your how you behave. Could you be? Well, it's actually two questions. Could you be happier by the way you move? And I would love to hear from you, what is happiness to you?
Oh, geez. Okay, that's a harder question. The first question, absolutely. So that a lot of the work on posture, what I call postural feedback, is really about happiness. And so clinically depressed people, for example, slouch. But if psychologists get them to sit up straight, their mood elevates, they remember more positive things from their lives. But the same is true for people who aren't depressed as well. So just getting them to sit up straight makes them speak in a more confident way, they use more positive words, and they feel less threatened by situations that tend to make people feel very anxious. So it's not just about confidence, it's also about mood. Walking in a way that's sort of bouncy and taking these long strides makes people feel significantly happier than walking in this cramped way. So mood absolutely can be elevated. It's not just confidence, it's also general feeling of positive mood or happiness. What is happiness? I guess I would have to go to sort of, in psychology, people are sort of moving away from that word and now they talk about well-being. And that's partly because cross-culturally, not everyone uses happiness. So for example, most East Asian people do not expect to be happy every day. So if you give them a 10-point scale and say, how happy are you? Most days they're gonna say 5. Americans are like 9, so they feel like they're supposed to be happy all the time. So it's not something that everyone wants to feel well, but not everyone in every culture feels that they have to be happy. So I think that to some extent it's culturally constrained, and I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to be happy all the time, when actually we should allow ourselves to have days that are just okay and not panic, right, about that. I think well-being is about having a sense of peace, about sort of how you move through the world. So walking through the world and interacting with people in a way that you can live with, really following your core values. So asking yourself in a situation where you go, should I do this or should I do that? Say a professional situation. You do what you can live with, right? You have to do the thing that you can live with. You have to be able to look back and say, I did the right thing. I mean, somebody said to me once, you can say the right thing and do the right thing, but you can't make the right thing happen. And that's a hard thing to accept, but it's so true. All you can do is the right thing. You have to honor yourself, honor other people, and that allows you to move through life with, I think, a sense of peace. So to me, that's what it's about.
Okay. Amy, thank you so much. It's been really a pleasure. It's been
You're welcome.
Great to learn from you and to try to keep some of the tips and the things that you've talked, because it may change lives. So
thank you so much.
Amy. Thank you very much.